Hi everyone, welcome back. We have made it to the end of the semester, so really you all owe yourselves just such a strong round of applause, and you should be so proud for making it this far with all that we've encountered. And with that in mind, let's start today's lecture, Lecture 10, which is on Monopoly. And like I mentioned last time, perfect competition I really view as the capstone to this class. We spent all semester really talking about the implications of a supply and demand model, and that comes to fruition when we put it all together in the market that is perfectly competitive. Now what we're going to do is take that perfectly competitive market and add some frictions to it. So chapter 9 is really the capstone. This is that strong epilogue to class. And with that, let's go ahead and get started on understanding monopoly. So like I was saying, because this is so related to that last chapter, this is just the last chapter with frictions, it's really useful to make sure that before we get to Monopoly, you are reminded of what a perfectly competitive market looks like. And if anyone has any questions, please reach out and email me or text me or continue setting up those virtual office hours appointments. But just to remind you, a perfectly competitive market has a large number of buyers and sellers and few barriers to entry and exit. And again, if you take my experimental class, we'll start to see why this might not be the case, but we are behaving as if this are true. And what happens when you have a large number of buyers and sellers producing nearly identical products, products like wheat, products like corn, products like ink, is no one firm has an influence on the market. What that means is they take the price as given. Firms are price takers. And as in all cases, perfectly competitive firms maximize profits by weighing the marginal benefits to the marginal cost. Firms in this case are just like any other economic agent, they think at the margin. So a firm maximizes profit by producing where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And remember, we mean economic profit in this case. So when firms set output to where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, we see three profit scenarios. One is where price is greater than the firm's average total cost, which means total revenue, which is just price times quantity, is covering your costs and then some, and thus you are earning some form of economic profit. In the other scenario, price is less than average variable cost, which means the firm is going to shut down. If you can't cover your variable costs, the firm will shut down, keeping in mind that even if it makes no output, it still has to pay its fixed costs. Keep in mind this is in the short run. And the third scenario is where price is less than average total cost. So you're operating at a loss, but you can cover your variable costs. So the firm stays open, but is earning a loss. Three possible profit scenarios. One is positive economic profit. The other is negative economic profit, in other words, a loss, but staying open. And the third is temporarily shutting down, producing no output. Now, keep in mind, we're dealing with this in the same case of perfectly competitive. No barriers to entry or exit. And so in the long run, firms in a perfectly competitive situation are going to earn zero economic profit. So what are we doing in this chapter? Well, we're just taking that market structure that we learned about, perfect competition, and adding frictions to it. In other words, we're comparing the market structures of monopoly and perfect competition. So to do so, we need to answer three questions. One is how are monopolies created? Two is how much do monopolies charge and how much do they produce? And three is what are the problems here, if any? Are monopolies problematic? If so, can we delineate those problems? And can we use some economic reasoning and perhaps some policy prescriptions to solve those problems? So let's start out by asking this first question. How are monopolies created? And a monopoly is a single firm in a market. So a monopoly is when there's just one firm in a market, mono from the Greek for one. So a monopoly is a single firm that sells a product without close substitutes. And here it can be helpful to think about what it means to have a close substitute. So I'm recording this lecture from the city of Lynchburg, where there is a minor league baseball team. And there is only one minor league baseball team in the city of Lynchburg, the Lynchburg Hillcats. So, do they hold a monopoly? Well, they do if the market is minor league baseball in the city of Lynchburg. But maybe there is a close substitute to minor league baseball, and that's field hockey at Sweetbriar. Or maybe it's entertainment and I can go to the academy and watch a show. So in order to see whether or not there is a monopoly, we need to define the scope of the market we're looking at, and that helps us determine how many firms there are and how many substitutes there are to that good or service. So a monopoly is a single firm that sells a product without close substitutes. And this monopoly firm can prevent entry from new firms. Keep in mind that in perfectly competitive markets, there are no barriers to entry or exit. And one of the things a monopolist can do is stop other firms from entering, either with strong arming or some sort of law or regulation. So, what is monopoly power? Monopoly power is also referred to as market power sometimes. Monopoly power means that the firm can set the price of their good or service. This is different than a perfectly competitive firm, which acts as a price taker. Here, a monopolist can act as a price maker. And what this monopoly power does is allow the firm to earn an economic profit in the long run. That doesn't mean it's guaranteed, but it means it's a possibility in the way that it's not under conditions of perfect competition. So if a firm can prevent entry and has some form of power, it's probably because there are barriers to entry in this market, restrictions that make it difficult for new firms to enter. In this chapter, we're going to talk about two types of barriers to entry in particular. We're going to talk about natural barriers to entry, and we're going to talk about created barriers to entry, usually in the form of government. But here I think it's useful to take these things that monopoly has, single firms that sell a product without close substitutes, where there are barriers to entry and price makers, and ask, what are some monopolies you know of? So go ahead and hit pause on your video. We'll regroup in the next little bit of this lecture, and we'll think about what are some of the monopolies that exist out there and why we might consider them monopolies.